to welcome on stage 3 top speakers to represent the views of the Commission and EUSPA. Please welcome with me Mr. Guillaume de La Brosse. Guillaume, welcome. Guillaume is the Head of Unit Innovation, Startups and Economics at the European Commission DG-DEFIS. Please, Guillaume, have a seat wherever you feel comfortable. Please welcome on stage our next speaker is Rodrigo da Costa, Executive Director of EUSPA, top speaker at CYSAT this year. Thank you so much, Rodrigo, for being part of CYSAT 2023. It's an honor for us to have a speaker like you at your level. Thank you so much for being here. And our last speaker, Claude Schanet. Welcome on stage, Claude. Claude is the Deputy Chair of the Security Accreditation Board at EUSPA. Are you guys comfortable? It's okay for you? Not too tight? Do you want to grab a seat there?
Yeah,
up to you.
Yeah, okay.
So you have space. This is the love seat. This is like very comfy, but you may...
So we have no space problem.
Exactly. Gentlemen, thank you again for being here. CYSAT, you see, 3rd edition, growing in terms of participants. We see the interest of people, of the community for cybersecurity, for space programs. We are very curious to hear what you have to say about security for the European space programs. I suggest we kickstart with you, Guillaume, first speaker. Do you want to stand up to deliver
I can
your...
go there, yeah.
Okay, okay. And then I'll go there.
Thanks so much.
You have a little, about 10 minutes
of
free.
I'll take a bit less.
Okay, and then we sit down.
Thank you, Mathieu, and I'm very pleased to join this panel today. Very pleased to be for the first time ever at the CYSAT event. I mean, basically, the Commission is taking very seriously security matters, including cybersecurity. So I'm very pleased to be here today to give you a bit where we're going in terms of cybersecurity issues at the level of the Commission. We've heard this morning very interesting panels and discussion presentations about the cybersecurity issues. And we are very much aware about the stakes that are getting higher and higher when it comes to security for space. It was a kind of wake-up call at European level when we saw this anti-satellite test from Russia in November 2021. For the space community, it was not a complete novelty. But when it comes to EU leaders at European level, it was really a wake-up call. And 2 months later, you had a meeting of defense ministers organized by the French in Brest. And actually, they spent more than 2 hours discussing space and security and defense issues, which was quite new on their agenda. And they decided that they need to do something, that space is no longer immune to any attacks from state actors or non-state actors, and they need to do something together, to combine forces to be able to protect their assets, space assets that are at the same time getting more and more critical. The Commission is very much aware about this, about the fact that space is getting more and more competitive and a contested area, that we have state actors willing to develop counter-space capacities, having space as part of their military doctrine, so that we need to take action. At the same time, space is getting more and more critical. It's getting a very critical infrastructure. And this is an infrastructure that is under high pressure, the same way other critical infrastructures are under pressure. We've heard this morning about the Viasat cyber attack the day before the Russian invasion in Ukraine. And we know that space is no longer immune to cyber attacks, be it the ground, space segments, but also the industrial value chain, and that's something that we need to take into account. At the same time, we are very much aware as well that, and we follow that, we encourage the rapid emergence of commercial actors, what we call the new space, but that community is less aware about the risk of cyber attacks, and that's why as well this is an element to be taken into account at EU level as well. So on the 10th of March, a few weeks ago, the Commission, together with the European External Action Service, published the first ever space strategy for security and defense. And this is a bit the kind of ambition, the ambition that Commission wants to draw for the future when it comes to the security dimension of space. So with that strategy, basically we consider the security not only as a peripheric element of space, but we're bringing security at the heart of our space policy. And what we want to do is to really do whatever we can to protect our space assets, not just the EU-owned space assets, Galileo, Copernicus, and tomorrow IRIS², but all the assets that are in the EU, member states' assets or commercial assets, from system integrators to equipment providers, suppliers of components or subcomponents. We need to embrace the entire value chain. So what's this new agenda that we want to propose at European level? There are different measures that we want to tackle. We want to engage, of course, industry closely. We want to engage member states. But I think challenge number one is raising awareness. We need to raise awareness about cybersecurity, cyber attacks. We need to build capabilities. To really capacity building is important. We need to develop a common understanding of the challenges, cybersecurity challenges. And that's why, and I'm sure that Rodrigo will get back to that, we want to propose the establishment of an EU ISAC, Information Sharing Analysis Center. Very much the European way. I mean, we know that our American friends have put together already an ISAC in the US. We are in close touch with the US to draw inspiration, to share best practices. But this is something that we want to develop and put together in EU as well. And again, to raise awareness and to foster information exchange on cybersecurity. So that's challenge number one. Challenge number two is promoting security by design when we develop space assets. So here we need to identify minimum security requirements, including minimum cybersecurity requirements that would have to be onboarded in the development of space assets. Not just, again, EU-owned assets or public assets, but at the level of private entities as well. That's something we need to do. Challenge number two is standards. We have already existing security standards. We need to foster their uptake by industry. We need to develop to see whether there are gaps, whether we need to adjust some security standards, including to make them more user-friendly for the new space companies, but that's something that we need to do as well. Challenge number three is technological sovereignty. We need to reduce our dependencies when it comes to certain critical technologies. So we have decided to increase investments at European level in the development of certain technologies. We want to have ensured access to semiconductors, to certain semiconductors, including for space. And here we'd like to tap into the potential of the CHIPS Act, so EU-wider initiative in the field of chips. Challenge number four is the protection of the industrial value chain. We need to protect not only the operators, but the entire value chains when it comes to space assets. We have tools at European level when it comes to foreign direct investments. So we need to check whether those tools are fit for purpose or whether we need to deepen the tools to ensure that we can indeed act and protect certain critical companies of our space value chains. To implement this agenda, there are different ways. But we in the Commission, we are convinced that we need to provide a regulatory framework, a stable and common framework at EU level. What we see today is, and that's good, many member states already have or are in the process of developing national space laws. We already have 11 or 12 member states having space laws on a national basis. But what we see, and that's less good, is that the set of requirements, the set of rules is not aligned, is not the same, which means that for your industry, you would have to comply with different set of rules. Sometimes you would have to comply with security issues, sometimes you wouldn't have to comply with security issues. So we see a bit of fragmentation of this regulatory framework within the European Union. And that's why we think we need to provide a stable and common set of rules including for the industry, including for enhancing the level of security. And that's why we have in mind to put on the table, that's something we're contemplating, but to put on the table an EU space law covering security aspects as well in the coming years. Of course, I mean, one of the beauty of such a space law is that we can get a governance organized as well. Governance means that member states would have to be equipped on a national basis, and they would have to share information as much as possible. And we know the value of information sharing when it comes to cyber. So that's something we can promote and foster through an EU space law. Just mentioning that because we had this discussion this morning, we have already a kind of, if you want, I mean, a first stage of the rockets. We have already, when it comes to cybersecurity, the NIS2 directive. This is what I call the first stage of the rocket. But with this space law, we could add the second stage, and we could plug some gaps. We could add the governance element. We could deepen certain aspects. And actually, we could cover EU space assets, member states assets, and commercial assets. So that's something that, again, we are contemplating. We are bringing together inputs elements from industry, engaging member states. But that could make a big difference. It could make a big difference, again, for security. It could make a big difference for competitiveness of the EU industry. And it could make a big difference when it comes to steering and influencing debate at international level as well. And as you know, I mean, the value of being the first one setting standards globally, you give a big of an advantage to your company. So that's why we are willing as well to go ahead with this EU space law. I leave it to that. Mathieu, thank you so much.
Thank you, Guillaume. That was very informative. I have a ton of questions.
Can you imagine?
But we'll keep them to the end. Please, may I ask you, Rodrigo da Costa, to come on stage, please, for your keynote, and then.
Sure. I'll try to do the presentation from here. It hopefully gets a bit more dynamic. So first of all, thank you very much, CYSAT, for inviting us. It's really a pleasure, and we are very proud to be partnering with this conference since day one, since the first edition 2 years ago, last year, this year. For us, it's very important because we are talking about something very fundamental. We are talking about security, cyber security and space, two really key elements. And I know that there are a couple of young professionals in the room. I'm very happy that you made the decision to join the two most dynamic areas, two most dynamic sectors nowadays, the space sector, extremely dynamic, but on the same way, also the cybersecurity sector. And by doing cybersecurity and space, you actually merge them together. So the level of dynamism is certainly very high. By the way, just a small side remark, we are hiring. So if you are interested in joining EUSPA, come and join us at all the different levels, the different profiles. Let me talk to you a little bit about what we do and what we do in particular in the domain of security. I will start maybe a bit more upstream, telling you a few words of what is the EU Space Program. Certainly it will be a repetition for many of you, but at least you get a feeling, you get a perspective on what we are talking about. The EU Space Program is actually bringing all the activities of the European Union in space under one umbrella. We have the very well-known navigation program. Certainly you've heard of Galileo, our global navigation satellite system, right now with more than 3.5 billion users, contributing to our economy, to our security, to our society in many different ways. Also EGNOS, by the way, directed for aviation, but very successful in other sectors. We have Copernicus. Copernicus is our Earth observation system, satellite data, in situ data, generating terabytes and terabytes of data every day that help us to better understand our Earth, what is happening with our Earth, but also what will happen, so helping us make predictions about the future state of Earth. We have GovSatcom. We are developing it right now for secured governmental communications, space situational awareness, very up-to-date topic as well, and then a number of other elements. I would highlight, in particular in this frame, everything we do in the domain of entrepreneurship, in the domain of innovation, where we are working in many sectors, by the way, also in the security sector. And we have somehow a new kid on the block, something that is coming up. It's coming up new and recently. It was already mentioned earlier this morning. IRIS², the infrastructure for resilience, interconnectivity, and security by satellite. It is a new program. It has been established a bit more than a month ago, so the regulation is in force, and we are very proud to work together with the European Commission, helping the European Commission of putting this new flagship program ongoing and making it moving forward as soon as possible. Right, so this is the space program at large, plus IRIS², not formally part of the space program, but if you want somehow in the domain. Then comes the question, what do we as an agency do in this space program? So, of course, we don't work alone. We work in a very close partnership with the European Commission. We work in a very close partnership as well with our friends of the European Space Agency. And we work with industry. We work with academia, small, big companies, entrepreneurs, SMEs, startups, etc., etc. And we basically have three missions, basically three pillars. The first one is the exploitation pillar, which means we are a service provider. So we provide services, we provide data, we provide signals that then are further used. We operate Galileo, we operate EGNOS, we ensure their security, we ensure their maintenance, we ensure their 24/7 availability. Then we have the security domain. I park this for a moment because I have a slide later on this. And we develop the markets. So we make sure that all these data, all these services that are produced in EU space, they find their way to the final users, they find their way to the application sector. Let me focus now for a moment on what we do in security. I guess as an audience, this is what you are most interested on. Basically, we are working in three different domains. It starts with what we call the security engineering. This is about creating the governance, creating the policies, but also the requirements at service level, at system level, that make sure that security is embedded by design on everything we do. We all know, certainly for experience, that if you bring the security layer too late, it's too complex and it's too expensive. So we want to make sure that our systems are secured by design. Then we do security operations. We have a security operations center where we monitor 24/7 the security of Galileo. We are looking forward to expand that capability, working as well on other space program components. And we are a provider of governmental services, which means we provide services to governments, to the EU27 governments. Right now, with a strong focus on Galileo, the provision of the public regulated service of Galileo. But also, we are looking forward to other services, for example, GovSatcom, one day on IRIS², and from July 2023, so in a couple of months, we will also do the front desk of the EU space surveillance and tracking, which basically it's also a service to users. Last but not least, we do security accreditation. There I will not go longer on that because my colleague Claude Schanet will dwell into that in a moment. In addition to all these and everything you see on the chart, we are also a key contributor to what Guillaume just mentioned before. We want to be a key contributor in the implementation of the EU space strategy for security and defense. Coming closer to a conclusion, let me talk for a moment about the EUSpace ISAC. The EUSpace ISAC is one of the several elements that are mentioned in that space strategy for security and defense that I have just mentioned. It was already said several times, space is considered a sector of high criticality in Europe, and the ISAC comes to contribute to protect this sector. With this ISAC, we have a few objectives. Of course, we want to increase the resilience and the capabilities that you have, the industry, large companies, small companies, we want to use this as a forum to put you talking together, sharing lessons learned, sharing expertise. We want as well not only that you talk among each other between commercial entities, we want to bring you together with public entities. So we will invite as well to the space CYSEC all the relevant public entities to ensure that there is a dialogue. And this will in the end function like a hub. So it will be a hub, it will be a platform for exchange, it will be a platform to facilitate security-related information exchange, to facilitate the dialogue within the community of space. But we will also aim at creating the links with other ISACs that are there in other domains, in the banking domain or finance domain, in different domains that have already this. We want to create these links as well. Now, what do we as an agency bring on the table? First, of course, we bring our mission. We are a service provider. We are a user-oriented operational agency. So we bring everything that comes with that. We bring as well our role in IRIS Square, our role in the EUSPA program that I have just explained, and very particularly, we bring our 24/7 operational capabilities. Something that we have in place, not only with the teams, the people that are providing 24/7 security-related services, governmental-related services, but also all the infrastructure that comes with that, the buildings, the facilities, the computers, etc., etc. So this is in a nutshell a first introduction, and certainly I'm looking forward for your questions, but the questions from everyone as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Please, Claude, feel free to use the stand or stay seated if you wish. This is for you.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm here to present the tasks and work of the Security Accreditation Board. I see the presentation is not published yet. There is not. Okay, so I'll just go to the desk and present it here. The Security Accreditation Board, to introduce you our tasks, it's probably wise to come back to the EU space strategy for defense and space as presented by the colleagues before. We have a growing importance in terms of strategy for space. We rely more and more on data and services based on space, which is positioning, navigation and timing with Galileo, Galileo PRS. EGNOS will have Galileo second generation soon. We have Earth observation, the whole Copernicus project, which will have governmental services in the future soon. There'll be telecommunications. We mentioned IRIS Square. We see that, and that has been mentioned before as well, space is becoming a critical sector. It has already been included in the new NIST directive, based on which is regulating cybersecurity, but it's also been part of the directive on the resilience of critical entities. We have higher threat levels. That has been discussed the whole morning, basically, and just now, which means we need more protection, and in case something does go wrong, we need more resilience. Now, of course, resilience can also just be achieved if we have more autonomy in Europe. That's the supply chain, but also who owns our companies and who do they owe money to. So the space program components we are talking about in the SAB are those that have been defined by the space regulation of 2021. So they are Galileo, as mentioned, EGNOS, Copernicus, space situation awareness and space tracking. And then, of course, we have had GovSatcom in the past, but that has been extended by the new regulation in March on the Union Secure Connectivity, also called IRIS Square. Both regulations define the Security Accreditation Board as the accreditation authority for the services that are delivered. We just mentioned them. And those regulations also define the tasks of the SAB, the tasks of the member states, the roles and responsibility of the SAB chairman, and of course the interaction between the SAB chairman and the executive director. So how are decisions taken by the SAB? The SAB is composed by delegates from each member state. There are delegates from the European Commission, and there's a delegate of the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy. But the decisions are taken by the member states' delegates, and we are looking for consensus. So all the decisions taken in the SAB are taken by consensus of every country. What is important to know is, of course, the SAB decisions are taken independently. There's no influence from the Commission or the EUSPA on the operational side or ESA. So we make sure that our decisions are being taken in a very independent manner. What do they cover? Well, first we decide on the security accreditation strategy for each component of the space program. This includes the scope, the responsibilities, the processes, the accreditation schedule and conditions, and basically principles of accrediting systems or interconnection of systems. The SAB also approves launches, which is an interesting topic at the moment. They are approving authorization to use systems in a particular configuration, and they give authorizations to declare services. The authorizations also include ground stations, and all this is done, if necessary, based on assessments, inspections, audits, and reviews. Now, the resources the SAB has, it's not just the member states, it's a whole team in EUSPA that's helping us. That's the Security Accreditation Department, which is at the moment about 17 people, I think, if I'm right. And they are, of course, acting completely independently on the rest of the agency that does implementation and operational stuff. This independence of the SADEP team, just like the SAB, is materialized by an agreement between the SAB chair and the executive director, which is done on a regular basis. Member states are, of course, providing experts. They're always invited to provide experts on security, cybersecurity, on systems, ground and space segments. So wherever we can have the input and help from member states, it's of course welcome. Member states have the particularity, of course, also to be the users and developers of user segments that interact, of course, with the program. The SAB aims to do end-to-end accreditations. So we need to make sure that the receivers, for instance, on the PRS side are actually functioning with the signals that the program is supplying, and vice versa. Then, of course, the SAB can rely on subcontractors if needed. Sorry, didn't push forward. Anyway, so at the moment, we are concentrating our efforts on cyber audits. And these cyber audits are of multiple qualities. We inspect the architecture, we check the configuration, we start to do or repeat penetration tests. We also check the organization of the cybersecurity that needs to be reviewed regularly, because an accreditation is always a snapshot of a situation at a given time. But we also need to make sure that activities are in place to maintain accreditability. As we have multiple programs and to evaluate, we are trying in the SAB to have a standardized approach for cyber security. Just as Rodrigo said, the SAB, just like EUSPA in general, are looking for colleagues, new colleagues. At the moment, we're looking for 2 cyber experts in the SAB, but there's a lot of interesting positions open at EUSPA in general. So join us, whether you're on the accreditor side or the ones being checked. So what are our main challenges for the SAB? Well, there's a whole lot of more activities than at the beginning when we were just doing Galileo and PRS. There's more services now for Galileo. There's the high accuracy service, which you may know, which is fantastic, giving a precision of the positioning to 25 centimeters. There's the open service navigation message authentication that helps users make sure that the signal they are interpreting to calculate their position is actually the EU signal and not, let's say, a Russian signal that's spoofed. Then, of course, there's the emergency warning system, which will be an interesting tool to help your countries to send messages in case of emergencies and catastrophes. Very often, in that case, it's the 4G networks and 5G antennas that will be destroyed first by the floodings and your fires. So to have an additional system coming from space might be useful. All this we are going to accredit and audit. There's AGNOS in its version 2 with the new updates we are checking. There will be in the more distant future AGNOS version 3, which all are happy to function properly each time we're landing somewhere in our planes. Then we have the GovSatcom, the existing program, and of course the future IRIS Square that will provide us with a lot of interesting work. Copernicus with the governmental services and space situation awareness, of course. Then, of course, as I said before, for the cyber audits, we need to review the situation quite regularly just to make sure the systems are still in place and still compliant. We need, for instance, to make sure that PRS that's been put into place with the Galileo first generation satellites will continue functioning with the new satellites for a long distant future. So all this will need resources, and that's a big challenge to get enough people in who are qualified to help us. So again, check the website of EUSPA and you'll find the positions that are open. As a conclusion, I might say that providing information in advance to the program with our accreditation schedule and the accreditation conditions, we try to offer maximum flexibility for the program to adjust their schedule with the ones that are needed by the SAB. We also, thanks to the independence of our accreditation decisions, we are hoping to provide additional confidence by the users in the EU space systems. And of course, the responsibilities are growing as much as the criticality and the various domains of the space program are increasing. And so I don't think we'll be bored in the future, neither will anyone else presented here. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Claude. Indeed, I don't think we'll be out of work for the next couple of years. Just a comment on the hiring. I think every single speaker that was on stage today mentioned that they were looking for talents and people. We did give out free tickets to students, so CYSAT may turn out into a job fair next year, because we really feel the need to connect the security people, security students, professionals with the space industry. So that's also part of the job of this event. All right, I have a couple of questions. Also, feel free. I see some coming up on the application. Let's start with a very simple one, maybe for you, Guillaume or Rodrigo. Can you please clarify the role of the European Commission and the agencies in IRIS Square, and especially EUSPA?
I start. So the role, and first, there are different steps when you go for such big EU new assets. you first need to get a political ambition where you want to go, then to translate that into a legal basis. You need a legal basis at European level. It took us 9 months to not only to produce, but to negotiate that legal basis together with member states and the parliament, which is a record time. Galileo, it took us more than 3 years to negotiate. Here, we negotiated that in 9 months because of the geopolitical context, because of the need to get this new constellation in place rapidly. And then, on that basis, we move to the procurement, which is the phase that we are running for the time being. So basically, issuing the call for tender, collecting different proposals, assessing the proposals, entering into a competitive dialogue, and awarding the contracts. And that would happen in less than 1 year. So 9 months to negotiate the legal basis, 9 months to award the contracts. That's the plan. So that's what the Commission, with the support of EUSPA, of course, is doing. And then once we have this constellation up and running, then we are really moving the file to EUSPA. And Rodrigo then will tell you, but I think it was very clear when it comes to the exploitation of the constellation and when it comes to the security monitoring and security measures of the constellation. But now perhaps Rodrigo can continue.
No, certainly. I mean, we are very lucky. We have very clear and brilliant lawmakers because the regulation says it all. If you go to the article in the regulation, you will find it explicitly what will be the role of EUSPA, and it is absolutely in line with what Guillaume was saying. It's building on our 3 pillars. So you will see in the regulation security as a role for EUSPA. You will see governmental service provision. It's also in there. You will see market uptake. It's a very important element, the market uptake, because this is, in the end, what creates the real benefits for the citizens. And there we will not only be looking at uptaking of navigation or Earth observation or communications, but the synergetic approach, because the users, they want to use space in a synergetic way to solve their problems in their sectors. Security accreditation, it's also very clearly written there, and management of contracts. These are the points that are written in the regulation. Now we need to come into the operations phase so that we can deliver our mission, certainly.
Thank you. Following up on that, so Guillaume, you mentioned, like you made the comparison between Galileo, how much time it took, and IRIS². To go further into that parallel, what are the main lessons learned from a program like Galileo that had a significant investment from the Commission? And what did you change for IRIS²? You mentioned speed for the validation of the program. Is there anything else you took into account? And I'm especially thinking about the new space onboarding with this rule of 30% that you may explain further.
I know. It's a very good question and a tricky one. So I think there are different elements. So first, I mean, here we're really talking about a very complex program. So the two, Galileo is highly complex. IRIS² is highly complex. The two have a strong sovereign dimensions, Galileo PRS and IRIS². Now, in terms of changes that and drawing lessons from Galileo, I think the first change was like, let's go for something which is perhaps more, give more space to industry, to the commercial operators through this public-private partnership. So that's something that we want to set up, including not to freeze or to kill the commercial markets. So we need to be quite careful there. So this public-private partnership is something that's new, and here we've drawn some inspiration from or lessons from Galileo. Second element is indeed a new space. So we want to give more space to new commercial actors, startups. We want to leverage this new program as well to buy services directly from those companies. That's something that we are not doing in Galileo, for instance. Here, that's something that we want to do. Why? Because it has a value to stimulate, boost the rapid emergence of those new space actors. And I think the third element is the governance. We have tried to simplify the governance, meaning the roles and responsibilities between the Commission, EUSPA, and the European Space Agency. So that's something that we have simplified. It took us some while, but clearly that's a big difference compared to Galileo, to make it more simple, which means we hope that the kind of delivery phase would be faster as well.
Comment, Rodrigo?
Nothing to add, maybe something to reinforce. I mean, we are listening to you, to the industry, and the message that we get from industry is that space is becoming more mature, space is changing very fast, it's becoming more mature, space industry has the capability of taking more responsibility. And this is something we hear, by the way, it's not unique for IRIS², we hear it as well on Galileo. I mean, we started Galileo on a traditional operational approach. 5 years ago, we changed to a service operation contract. So it's an operation contract based on a service level agreement. It was unique for the industry at the time, but the industry told us that they were ready, and we opened a competition, someone won it, and it's running like that, and by the way, it is running quite well. So industry wants to take more responsibility. Responsibility means risk, and we don't want industry then to come back and say, yeah, we wanted to take more responsibility, more flexibility, more autonomy, but in the end, if something goes wrong, you pay. The PPP that Guillaume was mentioning for IRIS² is a public-private partnership. It's not a public pays permanently. This is another thing. So we want to establish the first of the PPPs. So you need to take responsibility as well. We are willing to give that to you, but you need to take the risks. This is part of the deal.
If I may just, Mathieu, I forgot just one point, which is very important as well, and that's a big difference with Galileo, is that we have taken on board military requirements from day one by design, whereby Galileo we had to act in a hidden manner, though PRS was really designed for military purposes, but without saying it. Here, IRIS², that's really new. By design, we take military requirements on board, including in the design of the new program.
Yeah, when I was walking a bit down the aisle of CYSAT and the novelty we have this year with the startups, one of the comments we get often, and including us at CYSEC, is a bit of an envy, of a jealousy compared to the startups in the States that tend to have more contracts from MOD, DOD, contracts, so not financial support for innovation or research and development. So I think that's big expectations, at least from all the new space crowd that is well represented at CYSAT.
Yeah, I mean, no, this is well taken into account, and actually this is the second big shift when it comes to Commission and European Space Agency. The first big shift is really like taking more seriously the security dimension. The second big shift is really taking more seriously the new space actors and listening to their requirements. This is precisely what we do. I mean, basically, challenge number one for them is to get access to equities. That's something we're doing, we're working on it. But then indeed, they're looking for sticky contracts. They want to have contracts with Commission, with EUSPA, with the European Space Agency. And that's something that we do. The same way we expect industry to take risk in IRIS², we are taking risk in purchasing services directly to those new space companies today. And it's not just like an ambition or words, a nice thing. No, we are implementing that first in Copernicus. This is in the making. So there will be soon 9 companies getting up to 5 million contracts, whereby we will buy services to them. We will apply that to IRIS², buying services to new space companies, and we want to apply that as well to launch services, so to buy services, launch services to micro launcher companies as well.
If I may, to add something, I don't like very much comparisons. I take another stance. I think we Europeans need to be very proud of what we do and very proud of what we achieve. We have really a very strong space program. And also in the domain of startups and entrepreneurships, we do a lot. The Cassini program, for example, is a very strong contributor. I mean, with the Cassini program, we are giving prizes to people that are working on fusing space data with the metaverse. We are giving prizes to people that are using quantum technologies to work on space situational awareness, was one of the winners last year. Now, if this is not innovation, tell me what is innovation. Now, we cannot always expect, again, public pays permanently. That's not the point. We want to foster also companies to go and access the markets. But in the domain of entrepreneurship and innovation, there is really a lot going on. The Commission has done a superb job in putting in place the Cassini program. I think we have done a superb job in operationalizing it. So it is really already a success story. And it is in the beginning, or it's not really in the beginning, but it's in the first half. There's still a lot to come.
One last question before moving on about General Poti that we had before this morning. General of the Ukrainian army mentioned that they had to rely on private services via SAB that was hacked, obviously we know, and then Starlink. Do you think RA Square could be potentially something to be used by Ukraine in the future when it will be operational?
Well, first, I think Ukraine really and strongly made the case for getting a sovereign telecommunication service. So that's one of the elements as well why we have managed to go so fast when it comes to RA Squared. But clearly, then, of course, you always have to have certain legal parameters in place to cooperate with third countries. But the same way we can give access to Galileo PRS to certain third countries once the legal framework is in place, I'm sure we will, and this is foreseen actually, that we can do something similar with third countries when it comes to RA Squared. And this is foreseen indeed in the legal basis.
Okay, thank you. All right, reading the questions on the app, quite a few about the new regulations. You touched base on that, Guillaume. Can you tell us more about these future regulations? What scope? Who is concerned?
Exactly. So first, this is still a plan. So we are still discussing internally the exact time schedule. But the rationale again is that first we have several member states having different set of rules, not aligned. Some member states cover security, some member states do not cover security in their national laws. So the risk is fragmentation. And fragmentation means issue for the industry, because one industry willing to operate in France would have to comply with certain rules, that the same industry willing to operate in Germany would have to comply with different set of rules. And you know, Europe, the beauty of Europe is the single market. So here, the space law would be the single market of space. That's number one. Number two is that if we want to have the possibility to influence debate globally, we need to come together, not just isolated, one country, another country, no. So if we come together as Europe, having the same set of rules, we can really influence debate globally when it comes to standards. This is now the GDPR moment, if you want. It's better to be the standard setter than the ones taking standards set by others. The scope, for us, but again, I mean, we're still discussing, I'll get back to the timeline. But what we see as primary scope is safety, so space traffic management, sustainability, or the green dimension, the life cycle, the zero debris approach, and security, so the triple S. All the three elements would have to be covered as part of the space law. In terms of timing, so again, then the space law would have to apply to member states, commercial actors operating in the EU-based or non-EU-based, but each single industry willing to operate in the EU would have to comply with that set of rules, and EU-owned assets potentially. So 2023 is the moment of preparation of that space law, and then we'll have to see when we will table exactly the draft regulation.
Do you think you'll be inspired by some of the standards that are known today? I'm especially thinking about the NIST standards, which are usually referenced as the most popular standards when coming to security of space systems. Or will you start from scratch?
No. No, I mean, clearly we'll have to, there is no need to reinvent the wheel if there are good things that are in place. So we need, of course, first we need to take stock of what member states have on a national basis. That's number one, and we are going to engage with member states to map the national laws they have in place. That's number one. Number two, as mentioned this morning, we have some framework which are already in place at European level. The NIS2 directive, the protection of critical entities. So we need as well to act within that framework, and then again to do something on that basis that is really space tailor-made, if you want. So we'll draw from what exists, that's very clear, and then either plug the gaps or do something which is much more specific for space.
Will the SAB be involved in these new EU regulations?
Usually SAB is not part of the design of legislation. I mean, they will have to operate on the basis of certain security requirements that we will establish through that space law. They will come in the implementation phase, not in the design phase.
One more question about RSA Square from the audience. How do you apply the security by design approach on the IRIS Square project?
Good question. Do you want to give me?
I can start. I think Claude can mention something because in order to apply security by design, you have to look at the end. And the end is once you are going to accredit the system in order to be secure. So if you don't anticipate and you don't bring it from the beginning, then you have an issue. Well, it starts with the user cases and the requirement setting. So basically to define what are the different services to be provided. For those of you that have read the tender documentation that is public right now, you will have seen the different services that we are looking for. Those services will be transformed into requirements. Those requirements will have to be implemented from the beginning. I understand that also some of those requirements that Guillaume was mentioning are flowing from military requirements as well for the usage. And then in the end, we have a security accreditation strategy, but here, Claude, I think you are more competent.
Yeah. So obviously, key actors are, of course, the member states already working with the Commission on setting up the security rules. Once they are more or less done, the SAB gets them for an evaluation and consultation. And once they are set up and put into a formal documents, of course, we will come again at the end to verify that all those requirements that will have been defined way ahead will be implemented. The SAB also gets a small role in the preliminary design reviews. So there's a lot of back checks and controls, not only with the SAB, but also with the member states before those decisions are taken and before a lot happens until in the end the SAB does the audits and does the accreditation.
Perfect transition to the next question for you, Claude. Which cybersecurity standards guide SAB's assurance activities, especially audits and pen tests for the space segment?
Well, again, so here, just like the Commission, we don't insist on one particular standard. Of course, as the rules and regulations, just as our auditors come from member states, they have notions of ISO, they have notions of best practices. And the advantage here is, of course, we know when the systems are designed, what will be important, what will be the criteria. And in the end, I would even think it's less important to pinpoint one particular standard, but it's that regular review and that constant putting into question and improving that is basically the approach we all agree on. And then, of course, the SAB formally does that review, but it's not like it would be a new element for neither the program nor EUSPA.
Yeah, okay, very clear. Guillaume, this one may be for you from Vivien. How do you manage the different requirements coming from different member states? That's always the trade-off, right?
No, I mean, but here it's maybe you can complete. But this is precisely what we want to fix with a kind of common set of rules at European level to avoid precisely a situation of discrepancy between different cybersecurity requirements from one member state to another one. Again, I mean, requirements are not the same. What we need to, the same way you have tax haven, we should avoid that we have space haven in Europe. So that's precisely what we want to fix with the EU space law. That applies as well, and especially to security. In that geopolitical context, we need to take security seriously. Of course, I mean, there will be a trade-off between security and competitiveness. We need to be quite careful as well, not to impose too many constraints as well, including to the new space guns. I mean, if we come up with a heavy machine, we're going to kill that market. So here there is a trade-off, but still we need to find a smart way to go there.
One last question, because time is almost over, but the EU Space CYSAC. Can you tell us more details in terms of timing, who is going to be part of it, anything you can tell us?
I can tell you it's going to be very soon. I mean, create is a very difficult thing because the space CYSAC, once it is there, it is going to be something in continuous evolution. Again, it's a forum, it's a place for exchange, basically the objective that I have mentioned before. We are working very actively on that right now. Of course, we will make a number of proposal suggestions to the European Commission. We will converge on them. You will hear very soon. I don't want to firm on a date, but it's certainly something that we will do very soon. By the way, if this is my last opportunity to speak, I want to end where I started. I was expecting to have a question, something like, where are our main challenges? And I want to end I started by saying it's actually on the human resources. I mean, many of you will know we are in the European Year of Skills. We are missing millions of engineers in the European Union. I mean, the assessment is really brutal. We are missing millions of engineers. In the domain of cybersecurity, it's not millions, maybe it's hundreds of thousands, but we are missing a lot of people. And more in particular, of course, also in the space domain, we have to be attractive. So really all together, public side, private side, the companies, big ones, small ones, etc., we have to work together to attract talents to our business. Without that, we will not be successful. Conversely, if we get the good people, if we get the right people, future is bright.
Great. One last word, maybe, Guillaume?
Yeah, no, I mean, my message will be really that security really matters. Cybersecurity and non-cybersecurity, I mean, we need to cover the two aspects. But we need to get this framework in place as fast as possible to avoid any loopholes and to ensure that when it comes to space, that is getting more and more critical, we have what we need to fully rely on space assets for our economy, our daily applications, and our security and defense in the future.
Thank you. Claude?
Well, I think that recently a lot of efforts have been made to make things coherent. All those regulations we were mentioning are all seeing space and security in a very coherent way, whether it's cybersecurity, critical infrastructures, the new IRIS Square regulation, space regulations. So we have coherence way upstream in the regulations already, which later on help us to standardize levels of security. So we don't have high probabilities to have weakest links. And that will very further on downstream help the SAB's work, of course. And there I think Europe is getting the right approach.
Thank you so much.